Picture this, a single nation that's been completely erased from the map, not once, but multiple times throughout history, yet somehow always manages to rise from the ashes stronger than before. A country that gave us both Einstein and Hitler, Bach and the Berlin Wall, fairy tales and 2 world wars. Today we're diving deep into the absolutely wild roller coaster that is the entire history of Germany, and trust me, this story has more plot twists than your favorite Netflix series. From ancient tribes that terrified the mighty Roman Empire to becoming the economic powerhouse of modern Europe, Germany's journey is nothing short of extraordinary. We'll uncover how a collection of scattered tribes became a unified empire, how they lost everything twice in devastating wars, and how they rebuilt themselves into one of the world's most influential nations. Stick around because by the end of this video, you'll understand how Germany shaped not just European history, but the entire course of human civilization. Let's start at the very beginning, in the dense forests of ancient Germania. Picture Europe around 100 BCE. While Romans were building their massive empire with roads, aqueducts, and gladiator arenas, the Germanic tribes were living completely different lives in the thick woodlands of Central Europe. These weren't primitive people by any means. They were fierce warriors, skilled craftsmen, and surprisingly sophisticated societies with their own complex social structures. The Romans called this land Germania, but it wasn't really one unified place. Instead, it was home to dozens of different tribes like the Cherusci, the Suebi, and the Cimbri. Each tribe had its own customs, dialects, and territories. What united them was their shared hatred of Roman expansion and their incredible fighting abilities that would soon become legendary. Here's where things get absolutely fascinating. In 9 CE, something happened that changed the course of European history forever. A Germanic chieftain named Arminius, who had actually been educated in Rome and served in the Roman military, decided to turn against his former allies. He lured 3 entire Roman legions into the Teutoburg forest, where his coalition of Germanic tribes completely annihilated them. We're talking about the destruction of nearly 20,000 Roman soldiers in one of the most devastating military defeats in Roman history. This battle was so traumatic for Rome that Emperor Augustus reportedly spent days banging his head against walls, shouting for the lost legions to return. The Romans never again seriously attempted to conquer the lands beyond the Rhine River, and this created a permanent boundary that would influence European politics for centuries to come. But the Germanic tribes weren't content to just defend their homeland. As the Roman Empire began to weaken in the 4th and 5th centuries, these tribes started moving. The Visigoths swept into Spain, the Vandals conquered North Africa, and the Ostrogoths took over Italy. The Angles and Saxons sailed to Britain and established the foundation of what would become England. These migrations completely reshuffled the population map of Europe and marked the beginning of the end for the Western Roman Empire. Fast forward to the 8th century, and we encounter one of the most important figures in German history, Charlemagne. This Frankish king didn't just conquer territories, he created something entirely new. Through a combination of military genius and political savvy, Charlemagne united most of Western Europe under his rule. On Christmas Day in the year 800, Pope Leo III crowned him Emperor of the Romans, effectively reviving the concept of a Western European empire. But here's what makes Charlemagne's empire so significant for German history. It established the idea that the Germanic lands could be the center of a great European power. When his empire was divided among his grandsons in 843, the eastern portion became what we now call the Holy Roman Empire, with its heartland in the German territories. The Holy Roman Empire is one of history's most fascinating political entities, and also one of the most confusing. Voltaire famously joked that it was neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire, and he had a point. It was actually a complex federation of hundreds of different territories, duchies, bishoprics, and free cities, all theoretically under the authority of an elected emperor. This decentralized system created something unique in medieval Europe. While France and England were developing strong centralized monarchies, the German lands remained politically fragmented. This had both advantages and disadvantages that would echo through German history for centuries. On one hand, it fostered incredible diversity, innovation, and local autonomy. Different regions developed their own distinct cultures, dialects, and traditions. On the other hand, this fragmentation made it nearly impossible to create a unified German state that could compete with the emerging nation-states of Western Europe. Throughout the medieval period, the Holy Roman Empire was often the most powerful force in Europe. Emperors like Otto the Great, Frederick Barbarossa, and Frederick II wielded enormous influence. They controlled vast territories, commanded powerful armies, and played crucial roles in the Crusades and European politics. The empire's merchants and craftsmen became wealthy through trade, and its universities and monasteries preserved and advanced learning during the Dark Ages. But then came the catastrophe that nearly destroyed German civilization entirely: the 30 Years' War. Starting in 1618, this wasn't just a war, it was an apocalypse that lasted an entire generation. What began as a religious conflict between Protestant and Catholic states spiraled into a European-wide catastrophe that devastated the German lands like nothing before or since. The numbers are almost impossible to comprehend. Some regions lost up to 60% of their population. Entire cities were abandoned, farms lay fallow for decades, and the economic system collapsed completely. Foreign armies marched back and forth across German territory, pillaging and burning everything in their path. The war became so destructive that soldiers often had to resort to cannibalism to survive, and entire bloodlines were wiped out. When the Peace of Westphalia finally ended the war in 1648, the German lands were unrecognizable. The Holy Roman Empire still technically existed, but it was now little more than a legal fiction. Real power had shifted to individual states like Bavaria, Saxony, and most importantly, Brandenburg, Prussia. This brings us to one of the most remarkable stories in German history: the rise of Prussia. In the early 1600s, Brandenburg, Prussia was a relatively small and poor territory in northeastern Germany. It had sandy soil, harsh winters, and few natural resources. Yet, through a combination of military innovation, administrative efficiency, and sheer determination, the Hohenzollern dynasty transformed this unlikely territory into a major European power. The transformation really accelerated under Frederick William, known as the Great Elector. After experiencing the horrors of the 30 Years' War, he decided that Prussia would never again be vulnerable to foreign invasion. He built a professional standing army, streamlined the administration, and encouraged immigration to rebuild the population. His successors continued this policy, creating what became known as the Prussian military state. Under Frederick the Great in the 18th century, Prussia shocked Europe by defeating much larger powers like Austria and France in a series of brilliant military campaigns. Frederick wasn't just a military genius, he was also an intellectual who corresponded with Voltaire, composed music, and promoted religious tolerance. His court became a center of Enlightenment thinking, proving that military power and intellectual achievement could go hand in hand. But the late 18th and early 19th centuries brought new challenges that would test every German state to its limits. The French Revolution unleashed forces that swept across Europe like a tsunami. When Napoleon Bonaparte rose to power, he didn't just conquer territories, he completely reorganized the map of Europe. In 1706, Napoleon effectively ended the 1,000-year-old Holy Roman Empire with a single decree. He defeated the Prussian army so thoroughly at the battles of Jena and Auerstedt that Prussia nearly ceased to exist as an independent state. For the first time in centuries, most of the German lands were under foreign occupation, and it seemed like German independence might be finished forever. Yet this occupation had an unexpected consequence. It finally gave Germans a common enemy and a shared sense of national identity. For centuries, Germans had identified primarily with their local regions, cities, or states. But Napoleon's domination made them realize they shared something deeper: a common language, culture, and desire for independence. The wars of liberation that began in 1813 were unlike anything that had come before. This wasn't just armies fighting other armies. It was entire populations rising up against foreign occupation. Students, farmers, merchants, and intellectuals all joined the cause. The Battle of Leipzig in 1813, known as the Battle of the Nations, involved over 500,000 soldiers and resulted in Napoleon's decisive defeat on German soil. The victory over Napoleon created tremendous momentum for German unification, but the conservative powers of Europe weren't ready for such a radical change. At the Congress of Vienna in 1815, they created the German Confederation, a loose association of 39 German states that maintained the basic fragmentation of the old system while providing some coordination. This compromise satisfied almost no one, especially the growing number of Germans who dreamed of true unification. The 1848 revolutions that swept across Europe saw German liberals and nationalists attempt to create a unified, democratic German state. They even elected a parliament in Frankfurt and offered the crown of a united Germany to the Prussian king. But the revolution failed, partly because of conservative opposition, and partly because Germans themselves couldn't agree on what form unification should take. Should it include Austria with its large non-German populations? Should it be democratic or monarchical? Should it be centralized or federal? These questions would continue to shape German politics for decades. The man who finally answered these questions was Otto von Bismarck, one of the most brilliant and ruthless politicians in European history. Appointed Prussian Prime Minister in 1862, Bismarck had a clear vision: German unification under Prussian leadership, achieved through what he called blood and iron. Bismarck's strategy was masterful in its simplicity and execution. First, he modernized and strengthened the Prussian military. Then, he provoked a series of carefully planned wars that gradually excluded Austria from German affairs and brought the smaller German states under Prussian protection. The war against Denmark in 1864 was just the beginning. The decisive moment came with the Austro-Prussian War of 1866, where Prussia's superior military technology and organization defeated the Austrian Empire in just 7 weeks. This victory established Prussia as the undisputed leader of northern Germany and effectively ended Austrian influence in German politics. But Bismarck's masterstroke was the Franco-Prussian War of 1870–71. Through diplomatic maneuvering, he made it appear that France was the aggressor, bringing all the German states together in a defensive alliance. The war was a complete triumph for Germany. The French army was destroyed, Napoleon III was captured, and Paris was besieged for months. On January 18, 1871, in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, the German Empire was proclaimed. This wasn't just a political event. It was the culmination of centuries of German dreams and struggles. For the first time since the days of Charlemagne, the German people were united under a single government. The new German Empire was an immediate success by almost every measure. The population grew rapidly, the economy boomed, and German science and technology led the world. German universities became centers of innovation. German companies dominated global markets, and German culture influenced the entire world. This was the era that gave us the internal combustion engine, the diesel engine, aspirin, the X-ray, and countless other innovations that shaped the modern world. German cities like Berlin, Hamburg, and Munich became cosmopolitan centers that rivaled Paris and London. The German educational system became the model that other countries tried to copy, but success also created new problems and tensions. Germany's rapid growth threatened the established balance of power in Europe. Other nations, particularly France and Britain, watched Germany's rise with increasing anxiety. The arms race that developed in the early 1900s created a powder keg that needed only a spark to explode. That spark came in 1914 with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo. The alliance system that was supposed to preserve peace instead dragged all the major European powers into the most devastating war the world had ever seen. World War I was a catastrophe that destroyed the old European order forever. Germany fought brilliantly on multiple fronts for 4 years, but the entry of the United States and the exhaustion of German resources finally tipped the balance. By 1918, Germany was facing complete military and economic collapse. The armistice of November 11, 1918, ended the fighting, but it also ended the German Empire. Kaiser Wilhelm II fled to exile, and Germany became a republic for the first time in its history. The Weimar Republic, as it became known, faced enormous challenges from its very beginning. The Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh terms on Germany that many Germans considered unjust and humiliating. Germany lost significant territory, had to pay enormous reparations, and was forbidden from having a substantial military. The treaty created resentment that would fester for decades and provide ammunition for extremist movements. The 1920s were a time of incredible cultural creativity in Germany, but also political and economic instability. Hyperinflation destroyed the savings of middle-class Germans, while political violence from both left and right wings threatened democracy itself. The brief economic recovery of the mid-1920s was shattered by the Great Depression, which hit Germany harder than almost any other country. It was in this context of desperation and anger that Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party rose to power. Hitler's message of German superiority, revenge against Germany's enemies, and promises to restore German greatness appealed to millions of Germans who felt betrayed by the democratic system. The Nazi period represents the darkest chapter in German history, a time when one of Europe's most civilized nations descended into barbarism and launched a war that would consume the entire world. The Holocaust, the systematic murder of 6 million Jews and millions of others, remains one of humanity's greatest crimes. World War II ended with Germany's complete defeat and occupation by the Allied powers. The country was divided into 4 zones, with the Soviet Union controlling the East and the Western Allies controlling the West. This division, initially intended to be temporary, became permanent as the Cold War developed. The creation of 2 separate German states in 1949 seemed to confirm that German unity was dead forever. West Germany, officially the Federal Republic of Germany, aligned with the Western democracies and experienced remarkable economic growth known as the economic miracle. East Germany, the German Democratic Republic, became a communist state under Soviet influence. For 40 years, the Berlin Wall stood as the most visible symbol of Germany's division and Europe's Cold War split. Families were separated, friends were divided, and an entire generation grew up knowing Germany only as 2 separate countries. But then came 1989, a year that changed everything. The communist system in Eastern Europe collapsed with stunning speed, and on November 9th, the Berlin Wall fell. Germans from both sides rushed to embrace each other in scenes of joy that moved the entire world. German reunification in 1990 marked not just the end of the Cold War, but also the completion of a journey that had begun in the forests of ancient Germania. Today's Germany is a federal republic that successfully combines unity with diversity, strength with democracy, and prosperity with responsibility. Modern Germany is the economic engine of Europe, a leader in technology and environmental innovation, and one of the world's most stable democracies. The country that once terrified its neighbors through military conquest now leads through economic cooperation and diplomatic influence. From Germanic tribes that defeated Roman legions to a modern democracy that shapes European policy, from the Holy Roman Empire to the European Union, Germany's history shows us that even the most devastating setbacks can be overcome through determination, adaptation, and learning from past mistakes. The story of Germany proves that history isn't just about the past. It's about understanding how we got to where we are today and where we might be going tomorrow. What other nation's story would you like us to explore next? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the fascinating stories that shaped our world.